My name is Seppi, rhymes with Peppy. I'm going to be your MC today here on the discussion stage, and I'm really excited to be here. I'm the founder of She Hit Refresh, and I'm also a co-host of CMX Connect Madrid. So in today's session, we are super excited to introduce Stefan Cautin. And he's going to be talking about empowering your community to become self-sufficient. He is a community manager for EMEA at Shopify. Just before we dive in, and before I pass the mic over, just want to let everyone know we will be taking your questions. So please drop those in the Q&A box at the top. At the end of Stefan's session, we'll be taking your questions live there. All right, so without further ado, I'm going to pass the mic over to you, Stefan. Really excited to hear your talk.
Hi, everybody, and thank you for coming. I'm just gonna start by sharing my screen so you can see my notes, or at least my presentation. There. Yeah, so thank you for joining me. I'll be talking about empowering your community to become self-sufficient and share some learnings I've gained from working with my community. So to give you some more background info, I joined a team called Shopify Local in 2018. I had been working with Shopify for about 6 months before that, and the team was going through a relaunch and looked to expand outside of Canada to build communities of merchants and entrepreneurs. So I pitched Stockholm as one of those new cities and then got to join the now global team in the community efforts. So the goal of the team was to empower our local communities. I usually say that my job is to make sure people in our communities have the tools and knowledge to grow and succeed, and also to create the space so that they can meet each other and share insight and grow together, because that's what community is all about. And before I start to break down my community building journey, I want to set the stage. I don't know how many people here know what Shopify is about. You can post a little green heart in the chat if you know. But what it is basically is a e-commerce platform for people wanting to build a business. So Shopify is a Canadian company, and at the time was not that well known in Sweden unless you were really into e-commerce in some sort of way. So I couldn't rely on the brand awareness that my North American colleagues could. So I had to find a way to build a community and those partner relationships from scratch with the users that we already had, but that we hadn't really connected with. So my first step, and probably the first step of a lot of communities that aren't established or have somewhere to gather yet, is to create a space and time to meet. So I started by inviting people to our office here in Stockholm, Sweden, where I'm located, just so I could meet people and provide them with some knowledge. It was presentations and workshops and things like that, just to talk about how it is to run a business or how to use Shopify, just being a merchant in general. And all of this was pre-COVID, so you will see a lot of pictures of people sitting together. So something that I really hadn't counted on was the importance of giving people the opportunity to connect, to discover similarities, and start those important conversations. That became like my first aha moment as a new community manager, because a lot of the members that I was talking with were small business owners that were either part of a really small team or working alone, or they were creators who really didn't know that much about business, but they wanted to be able to sell their products. And at Shopify, we are all about making sure that people can become independent. So the next step for me was to find a way for people to keep in touch. So creating that way for people can interact and create that contact. So I'm sure that people have worked with different social media groups or platform community pages and things like that, like a forum where community can gather. So before that, I had like a local community page where I posted my events, some resources. You can contact me and sign up for a newsletter. But there wasn't really a way for people to interact after a meetup. So people were coming to these meetups, and after a while, they were like, how do we keep in contact? How do we continue these conversations and these discussions that we have started here so that we can continue to help each other? And I remember how we first started. We just tried out just like a LinkedIn feature where you can connect with people around you through Bluetooth. I'm sure like if this was in person, we could try it out. So we tried that first, but we found that it wasn't really the best solution for us. As I mentioned, a lot of people were new business owners and not really into like the LinkedIn world part of running a business. So we kind of wanted to find somewhere that was a better suited for this local community. So as I was looking for that, I started to look at the next step, which was to encourage people to take on the leadership role to help guide that community. And I say leader, I'm sure there's many different words that people use, like an advocate or an ambassador, basically another person that's helping you. For me, these were people externally. So these weren't working with Shopify at all. These were other merchants that wanted to, that I saw that they wanted to spend their time in helping me build this. So at the time, we were still working on the best way to connect digitally so people could continue the conversations. And we weren't sure if me creating another social media group would be the best option in the long run, as I already had my local page where people could subscribe to the newsletter and find my events. So instead, I encouraged a few people to start a group themselves. And that way I could support them rather than having to micromanage a new group. And you can see in the photo here, one of the community leaders, his name is Jasper. And I'll be coming back to this photo again. But he and one of his friends then started this new group on Facebook, which became like an addition to the community group, where people could gather and meet and continue that. So having started to build that local community and finding this space where they could continue to interact with each other was super important. And so where did that take me? So since I started my work with Shopify and with the community has really changed during these years. So we went from in-person events to being completely digital during the pandemic. This enabled me to also shift my focus from just Stockholm to Sweden. And now, a whole year later during the pandemic, I've shifted my role again. So my focus is rather on the EMEA-wide region instead. As I'm shifting to be less hands-on with this specific community that I build together with the community leaders, I realized more and more how setting up a self-sufficient model with good leadership had been super beneficial for both me and my community. This is a quote or like a review maybe from a community members that attended our events. It really shows that our community managed to promote the content that we created, but that we also managed to live up to the expectations that we set. And during this pandemic, we managed to both keep the events going online and also keep a high attendance rate. So over the last year, with just the digital events, we managed to have an over 60% attendance rate. And this newsletter still get a lot of attention and almost 50% open rate and things like that. And one thing we also saw is as things changed and we adapt and the community adapt, my community leaders also adapted and they created a new sub-community in addition. So to get there, I see that there were two important things that I needed to build this self-sufficient community. And when I say self-sufficient, for me, is that I don't have to micromanage it. I don't have to go in and answer to every post that is posted or check all the figures, but instead I support the community leaders leading them. So the first thing were the social spaces, where basically where people meet and gather and talk. So that can be before the pandemic, that was at the office during our in-person events, or now our events digitally, but also where people talk on in the different Facebook group, for example, where they share their questions and their knowledge. And one thing that's super important here is to set the expectations, so people know why they are here and why you are there representing your company. The next thing was the community leaders, like Jasper, as I mentioned, making sure that you understand them and empower and support them in their own goals. And I will be talking a bit more about these two. So going first into the community or the social space part, clarity is key. Like, these questions should be really be something that both you and your community should be able to answer. So make sure that you and your community members know why they are there. They should also know what is expected of them and what opportunities they have within the community, and make sure that you are open with those goals so that you also can work towards the same mission. And this is also, I think, also applies to both communities that you manage 100%, but also communities that you might be part of. I'll be coming back to that a bit later. But this way, I managed to build a culture, and you can also do that, where you need to make sure that that people are on board, where you create an open space and people understand why they are there. So I made sure that I always told new people I met the same thing I told at the beginning of this presentation, that my job is to make sure that our community members have the tools and the knowledge to grow and succeed, which really tells them why I am there, what they could expect from me, and what I can help them with. So looking at some examples from my community, or the community we built here, is I saw that people joined and stayed because of first the content. So I had localized content which was in Swedish, or specifically about being a merchant and entrepreneur in Sweden. The other was the sense of inclusion, where people could ask each other questions and grow together, start a conversation during an event, and then continue it online. Third was the access to experts and leadership, and also Shopify directly through me as a representative, where they could request a topic, so I could find the right person to speak about that, if that was from internally from within the company or externally through a partnership. But also give me feedback so that I could bring it back with me to our developers and the teams that are building new features and building out the platform for our users here. So you really need to be deliberate in the decisions that you make for your community. So I made sure that I always keep these things in mind as I was building out my program. And even as I moved away from it, from being like managing, micromanaging this, my goal was always to just be there as a supporter. And so I always keep those things in mind as I plan my events and invited guest speakers. So also make sure that I give other people the space to show up and talk and get a platform, because the community also needs to be understand why things are done the way they are. So sometimes what our community wants and what they need are not always the same thing. I come from a background of working in support, and sometimes you need to make sure that they understand why you are telling them a specific thing. And that was really key with the social spaces, like be clear in what the goal is. This is a quote from Richard Millington. He also had a presentation earlier today here. And in his book, Buzzing Communities, he talks about the different stages of the community, where the last two stages are maturity and mitosis. That would mean when the growth and the activity in the community is done mostly through the community referrals and initiated by the members. So really, the community members are the ones driving the growth of the community. And what I found important for my community as I worked towards creating this self-sustaining model was the leaders and having them on board, making sure, as I mentioned before, like being clear in what I wanted to achieve, and also having them be clear in what they want to achieve with helping out these communities. So back to Jasper, who was one of the community leaders. It was I found him quite early. He was very vocal about being part of and helping out, and he was asking the right kind of questions. And you need to find the people who are your biggest supporter, the people who are willing to spend the time and energy to make your community thrive, and make sure that you understand them and what they want to achieve so that you can help them out. And in that sense, they will also stay with you, stay with the community, and build on those relationships in the long run. So what I did as I learned that Jasper wanted a platform to teach other people and share his knowledge, I started to invite him in as a co-host. So he started a business together with his wife. And in the years that he'd been working and using Shopify, he managed to build a business where he didn't have to control everything. He hired a bunch of people and they got like good outreach. So he kind of wanted to share his journey and also help people avoid some of the mistakes that he did. So I started by inviting him as a co-host. He started to create his own content. So on Instagram, he made a channel, on YouTube where he talked about his journey and his thoughts about running a business. So I made sure, okay, how can I help you? So I started to share those with people. Later on, that went from just creating content to creating events. So he created a co-working event where he invited a bunch of different business owners used to come here, sit at the table, work together, and together they would ask each other questions and share insights, which was really cool to see. And that turned into like an actual meetup event where they had a set agenda. They split up in different subgroups talking about a specific topic, and then just invited me to be part of that. So I didn't really have to be the one setting up and facilitating everything, but rather than that, Jasper and his friends did that for me and for the community, and I could be there as a representative of Shopify and answering some questions. So really just there to show my support and showing that we are behind them. And this is a picture from the first co-working event they did, which is really cool for me to see. And as the pandemic hit, and I wanted to continue to support them, they started to instead, Jasper started to think, okay, how can we continue these? And that moved into hosting things on Clubhouse. So really the approach that he did adapted with the situation, and I made sure to support them and be there for their events as a representative to answer questions, even though everything wasn't specifically about Shopify, but in general about running a business. So going back to how I built my community to be self-sufficient, meaning that I don't have to micromanage everything here. Expectation, I think there's an expectation sometimes that we as community managers need to control everything and always have to own everything with our communities. And I think it's important for us to ask ourselves if that's really the case. Do we have to be the ones who are creating and managing everything? Can we rather join something that's already there? Can we be part of something that someone else is running? Can we, instead of being the manager, can we be the supporter? And then in that way, helping them out. And even if it isn't your own community, it's important to think about the culture that you want to achieve, especially with something that's going to last when you aren't there all the time. So I go for a culture that's very open, and that way I can build trust, so people know, as I mentioned before, why they are there, why you are there, and what's really the point of it all, which will make it easier for them also to promote your community later on, especially as working around a specific product as I did. And then also don't be afraid to get help from others and put the powers in their hands, the leaders. So empower your biggest supporters and get the help to the community. It's not always easy to find the people who are willing to do that. It's not necessarily the person who write the most posts, but it's really the people who bring the most ideas to the table, the doers, the people who are willing to spend that time and energy to build and empower your community together with you, and then to understand their goals and help them reach those, whether that is a platform or some sort of influence. So you can support them with time, tools, or publicity, and that will help you build that self-sustaining community, because people and the leaders will also know there's a reward for working together. For example, with Jasper, we also set up an affiliate program where he could get referrals from the content he produced on YouTube. And that way he could feel that he got something or more back for the content that he created for my community. Because the power that we have as community managers is that we can really amplify the voices of the community and the community leaders, and really be that bridge between the community and the companies that we work from. Thank you.
All right, fabulous. Virtual round of applause out there. Thank you, Stefan. We actually have a few questions here, so I'm going to hop over to the Q&A box here. And thank you all for your questions. Thank you so much, Stefan, for this incredible presentation. So we just have a few minutes, so I'm gonna start from the top. Pixie has a question. She says, how do you avoid the community from turning into a complaints channel?
As I mentioned, like setting the expectations early, or understanding, like we also got people complaining, but having the leadership on board, the people who are kind of managing the community for you, understand what the community wants, and engaging them with content that not necessarily is all about complaint, instead of going from like a problem finding aspect, instead of lifting up people. So people would we made sure that people share their first sale or their first big deal that they manage. So that way you kind of shift the tone of the community without necessarily saying like you shouldn't post this question.
Fabulous. All right. Yes. Let's see. I'm going to go to another. Oh, we got the questions keep coming in. So we have another question here. Andre says, how do you determine how much power a community leader can have so that they don't lead the community into areas you don't want to?
Super good questions. I think there needs to be like an understanding there. So I usually say the best way to know if you can trust someone is to trust them. So giving them that space to try something, and if that doesn't work, try to kind of steer the community back in the way that you want, because there's nothing wrong with testing different things and seeing like what really works. It's the same with marketing. Like people try different things. Like, does this work? That doesn't work, and take the learnings. Like, okay, this person really doesn't really. Their goal is X. Why I want to achieve Y. So understanding them from day one, and then testing them, and then see what needs to be tweaked with that relationship with the community later on.
Fabulous. We have time for one more question here. So I'm going to ask Louise this question. She asks, how do you ensure consistency across community meetups when you empower customers to organize or facilitate meetings so that customers get a similar community experience regardless of which meetup they go to? A
good question. I make sure that, so a lot of so everything started from the meetups I did. So when someone said that they were interested in hosting something, I made sure that they knew, like, okay, I can help them, I can help you out, so that they could get the resources that I used or the information that I had to create something as similar as possible to facilitate the same kind of feel and vibe and experience that you want to have, like, across everything. But yeah, like as I said before, like, just let people test something and don't be too afraid, because the goal here is for you to not have to micromanage everything, and the goal is for your community to do some of the work for you.
Fabulous. Well, I see we have a few more questions, but we have run out of time. So everyone, please help me give a virtual applause again to Stefan. Stefan, thank you so much for your time. This was a very enlightening session. And I want to thank all the viewers out there. Thank you so much for attending. We have a lot of people in the room today. Thank you so much for attending and for your questions. Please stick around. We have so much coming up. Please go head up to the agenda or to the main stage, see what's happening out there, choose your sessions, and we'll be seeing you throughout the day. Stefan, thank you again.
Thank you.
All right. Bye, everybody.